What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the 30 on 30. Okay, what I'm going to do now for the next 30 days is I'm going to break down every single team, one per day, and do a video on it. Okay, I'm going to alternate National League and American League to kind of go back and forth. But I definitely encourage you to watch, your team, and especially the teams that are rivals to your teams at the very least. If you don't watch all of them, even though I encourage you to watch them all, but you'll see how I'm basically going to go over their needs this offseason and essentially what they should do with those needs and versus what I think they'll actually do with those needs. So it's going to be like a needs and predictions video, okay? And I'm going to go over all 30 teams. So it doesn't matter who your teams are, who your team is, I'm going to cover them, okay, for the next 30 days, okay? Before, since the winter meetings have physically been canceled in person, there's still going to be some type of virtual thing. But now that free agency started last night, Sunday at 5:01 p.m., things are going to really start ramping up. So I want to cover all these teams, and I will make adjustments accordingly along the way if a team does something in free agency or trade or whatever that alters what I have for them here in my book. But so that's what I'm going to do for the next 30 days. So I hope you're ready for it. Hope you enjoy it. And if you're a baseball fan, first time to your channel, welcome. Make sure you subscribe to the channel right now and hit that bell next to it so you don't miss all the videos I'm going to be putting out. And I've got a ton coming. Okay, so if you're a baseball fan, this channel is definitely for you. My regulars, you're the best. I love you all. Thank you so much. And remember, always put comments or your feedback in the comments down below. I have dialogue with everybody. And let me know if you subscribe in the comments too so I could personally thank you. So with that, and always look in the description, by the way. You'll always see recent videos and videos that are pertinent to these and so on in the descriptions too. Okay, so with that, I'm going to start with the Chicago Cubs because somebody actually asked me to start with the Chicago Cubs. All right. So this means now, as a caveat too, they have mentioned that they want to lower payroll and lower spending. So that's gonna create a couple of, I don't know about obstacles. It's just gonna have to force them to be frugal or maybe trade people. So and I've mentioned this in other videos and even in my trade predictions video, 7 trades that should happen is, in my opinion, they should trade Chris Bryant to Atlanta. Because it's an opportunity for them to recoup a lot of trade value. And even though they have a pretty good-looking player over there, it's an opportunity for Atlanta, who's kind of in long-term and win-now mode as well. I think Chris Bryant is a candidate for a change of scenery, and he can recoup a bunch of prospect capital back for Chicago, who still has their nucleus, but it's pretty clear that they're not going to re-sign him after this year, particularly with the lowering payroll. So, and then Baez is a free agent next year, so they might lose both. So don't be surprised if they trade the Contreras, Baez, and go under a full rebuild. Lester's a free agent. We'll see if they bring him back too. But who knows what they're going to do. But some of the needs I have identified is infield or second base, a closer, and outfield and starting pitching, particularly losing John Lester. A couple of ideas I had in mind. Colton Wong, who is a free agent now after not having his option picked up by the Cardinals. He to me is a good, solid infield guy who can play multiple positions, particularly at second base. And it looks like they have a good need at second base. No long-term solution there. Colton Wong's still pretty young. But he's in a real good contact player. He's a hard-nosed player. He's a hustle player. His intensity's there, and he's the type of player that you want on a team like this, who can only make the players around him better. So as an infielder who either play like a utility or a second baseman, I think Colton Wong will be a good person for them. A closer, they've struggled. My predictions video, I have something in there. So if you haven't seen that, put the predictions. I think they should sign that person or maybe Alex Colon because. And then their current they just have not had success with their current closer. So and their bullpen needs some arms. Okay, and I think Colomi would be a good. Is it Colom or Colomi, whatever it is? I think he'd be a good candidate. Even though Chicago White Sox should probably re-sign him, but I can see him going across town to the Cubs and getting maybe a 2-year deal, something like that. Robbie Grossman, in my opinion, would be a good outfield option for them, needing an outfielder who can maybe play multiple positions. I mean, they got Hayward and Wright, but there's still some unpredictables in the other areas. Ever since that lost Soler. I mean, they have Schwarber out there, but I think he's more better suited probably to first base. But even though they have Rizzo, if Rizzo, they exercise his option. But if he leaves, who knows? They might move a Schwarber to first base next year, but which would open up a spot in the outfield for somebody like Robbie Grossman, in my opinion. So he could play multiple positions this year, and then maybe shift over to left, and would give them a solid veteran player to plug into the outfield while still keeping somebody like Schwarber, even though there's a potential they may lose Chris Bryant and Baez next year. Javier Baez, a shortstop. So next year is a shortstop bonanza. I mean, you've got Baez and Lindor, both free agents next year. So, and I think Trevor Story, too, from the Rockies. So the trifecta of superstar shortstops is going to be available next year. So it's going to be, I think a lot of teams are probably going to be gearing up for offseason next year, and hopefully they recoup some of the money that they lost, unfortunately, this year because of the COVID. But we'll see. Next year, I think is going to be obviously be a much bigger spending year than this year. But I have teams being relatively frugal this year, but there'll be some big expenditures. Like for starting pitching, I do think that they should re-sign John Lester, but I can see him going back to Boston or maybe going somewhere else. But J.A. Happ would probably be a decent. He's older, just like Lester, but he would be a decent and a more cost-effective option there, even on a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal. He had a pretty solid year, but there were some spots where he was just not good. But I think a change of scenery back to the National League for him. And and somewhere you can plug him as again a number 3 or number 4, number 5 would be a good option for them as well. Now that's what their needs and kind of what I think they should do. Now here's what I think they'll actually do. I think they're going to bring in somebody like D. Gordon, who's still young, fast, decent contact hitter for second base. He's somebody that could be, you have him on base and you have Baez hitting or Bryan hitting or Schwarber hitting. He's a guy that can, go from second to home on a base hit or even first to home on an extra base hit or, first to third on the base hit. So he's got wheels. So, and I think having somebody like that would be good. Even though, can't go wrong with Colton Wong in my opinion either. Closer, I think they'll wind up probably bringing in somebody like Liam Hendricks. Again, power arm. He was the A's closer, dominant, and he's primed for probably a 2-year deal at this point. He would have been primed for probably a 3 or 4-year deal if we weren't in kind of financial Armageddon right now. But and I think moving him to the National League would be he'd be still dominant there as well. Outfielder, I can see them bringing in somebody like Kevin Pillar, who's been with the Red Sox. Epstein has a tendency to bring Red Sox players over to the Cubs. And I think Kevin Pillar would be a good candidate. Again, another veteran outfielder who's just a solid guy, consistent, gets on base, drives the ball. He's not overly reliant on the home run. He can get going right in there, be a good complement to the rest of the guys in that lineup. He'd be a good outfield piece as well. He's pretty solid on the defensive front too. So I think he'd be an overall good fit, and I can see them getting somebody like that. And on the pitching front, I actually see them bringing in somebody like Jake Odorizzi. Bringing him over from the Twins, who probably should re-sign him too. They keep, the qualifying offering the guy, but he'd be a good candidate for a 2 or 3 year deal. He's still young, 30 or 31. He's a consistent guy, and he's somebody that can just go, you can plug in every 5th day, and they need a guy like that, particularly with Lester being older, and he may not, be able to put up that consistency for, the next 2 or 3 years, but somebody like Odorizzi can. So, and again, plugging him behind Darvish and some of those other guys, I think he'd be a good fit in that rotation. And by that, and then you'd be adding a starter, you'd be adding a reliever, you'd be adding an infielder and an outfielder. So addressing some holes in a rather cost-effective way, particularly when they want to lower spending. This gives them an opportunity, particularly if they trade somebody like again, Bryant or some of their higher play, because Bryant in arbitration, he's probably going to make $20 million this year. Even though he had an off year in 2020, don't be surprised if he makes 20. These guys, you can probably get 2 or 3 of them for a total of 20. So, just a thought that way. Again, who knows if they trade Schwarber at some point too. Things are going to get expensive. They still have a good nucleus, but their championship window has been closing. So I can see them making moves like this, and this is what I see the Chicago Cubs offseason turning out to be. So, hope you enjoyed this. If you did, hit the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe again, and let me know what your feedback is below, what you think they should do or will do. My next team, I'm just going to go across town and do the Chicago White Sox, the American League, one of the American League powerhouses now. So, be on the lookout for that one tomorrow. Okay, and be on the lookout for a bunch. So for the next 30 days, you're going to get a new team every single day. So, be well, everybody, and look out for each other. Talk to you then.